Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I hope you are all well. I want to share a brief thought and some reflections as we head into Shabbat Vayechi, the last Shabbat of Parshas Bereshis, and of course the earliest. I think it's the earliest Shabbos of the year. 3:37 Shabbos comes in. Wow, it's like I don't even know why I'm going to go home. Might as well go straight to shul. Anyways. So we find that Jacob, as we mentioned previously early in the week, he decides that he's going to bless his grandsons, Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim and Manasseh, Reuven and Shimon, Yuli. That Ephraim and Manasseh were going to be upgraded. They were going to have the status of the other tribes, even though they were a generation later. And we spoke yesterday about what that means, and I would recommend you to have a look at some of the ideas that we shared. They were very interesting. When they arrived, in other words, when they arrived in front of Jacob, Jacob's on his deathbed. Joseph is called. He says, I want to bless you and your sons. Bring in your sons. So there are two observations I want to make. Number one, when they arrive, what does he say, Jacob? Yaakov says, Mi Elah, who are these people? Who are they? Now, it's a very strange thing to say. Think about it. 17 years, Jacob lived in Egypt. He hadn't seen his grandsons in 17 years. It had been a pandemic, so he wasn't able to be with his grandsons for 17 years. I don't think so somehow. So obviously he recognized them, he knew them. But what was being suggested and asked by Jacob is we have to understand, and we have to take ourselves, when we look at the Chumash, we have to go back and we have to put ourselves and try and understand the depth of the personalities. And Yaakov, of course, as the forefather of our nation, was giving a blessing. A blessing is not just, wishing you well. It's something that's going to be infused into the sanctity, is going to be infused into the very soul, the very fiber of Ephraim and Manasseh, and it's going to be into future generations. And therefore he wanted to know, are they were dressed as Egyptians? We have to understand, right? They were dressed as Egyptians. Joseph was dressed as a viceroy of Egypt. So they looked very different to their grandfather. They looked very different to their uncles and their aunts, right? That had come and isolated, or at least insulated themselves by living in Goshen, right? So therefore, Yaakov wanted to know, listen, you, Joseph, have brought up your sons in a very, very different environment to the environment that I brought you up in. I brought you up in the Haim. I brought you up in Galicia, in Poland, where there was shtetlich. That's the way they were brought up, in a bubble. And Joseph's sons, by dint of the fact that Joseph was the viceroy of Egypt, there was no possibility of doing that. They were brought up in a very open society, a pagan society, a immoral society, right? And therefore, Jacob wanted to know, I know you're my grandsons, but are you worthy of carrying the blessings? I want to give them to you, but are you worthy? And Joseph said to him, you know something, Dad? They are my sons. Not just in name, but in deed. They are exactly the same. There is no generation gap. We are on the exact same wavelength. That is the greatest blessing that we could give our children. And that perhaps is why Joseph doesn't actually get a blessing. We're not told that Joseph gets blessed. His brothers get blessed. His sons get blessed. Ephraim and Manasseh get blessed as his sons. But Joseph, we never hear that Jacob blesses Joseph. Why? Because the greatest blessing for a parent is to see their children blessed, to see their children which are following in their footsteps, which are going in a direction, in a path that they can be proud about. How do you know? I think Roberto Wine said it. How do you know if you are leading the life that you should? If your grandparents were to be alive and were able to see you now, would they be proud of you? Would they see you as following in their ways? Would they identify with your lifestyle? So often, it's the question of Jacob is the question that many grandparents ask. Mi Eila, who are these? Who are these grandchildren? Do I recognize them? Are they following in my footsteps? And what's interesting is when Jacob, and this is the final thought or observation, it's not even a thought, just an observation. When Jacob gives the blessings, when Yaakov gives the blessings, you know what he doesn't sugarcoat. He says it the way it is. And I always wondered, think about it. Why, these are the last words that Yaakov is going to utter. Why didn't he just say nice, sweet things to him? You should all be well. You should be successful, prosperous. Give nachas to your parents or to your mother at least, right? Why didn't he do that? And the answer is quite simple, because Yaakov was a real father, a real patriarch. And that means sometimes in loving your children, you have to demonstrate tough love. You have to say things that are uncomfortable to disturb the comforted. And therefore, what did Jacob do? Jacob said to each of his sons, he gave them a blessing that they needed to hear. So for Shimon and Levi, that had showed their zealotry in destroying Shechem and wiping out a whole city, he said that you've acted in a zealous way, and he warned them about it, the impetuousness of the way they behaved. So Jacob gave each blessing to each child that they needed. It wasn't one size fits all. A wonderful lesson to leave you with as we head into the earliest Shabbat of the year. Wishing you all well. And before I go, let me just say a personal Shabbat Shalom to Clarice, to Peter, to Deborah, to Mervyn, to Michael, to Rachel, to Joe, to David, to Rebecca, to David, to Carol, and to so many more that are joining us from around the world. It's lovely to have you here. Stay strong. As we say at the end of this week's parasha, we finish the book of Bereshit. What do we say, friends? Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. How do we stay strong? You strengthen me. I strengthen you. Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. And then we together collectively will be strengthened. May we all be strengthened in the coming days and weeks in these challenging times. And in that way, through strengthening each other, we will have the strength to come through this stronger, healthier, and better equipped to move forwards into a better world. Shabbat Shalom.